Okay, I want to give a short talk here today about scientism. And people don't realize that this is a problem, and it's as opposed to science, and I'm going to talk about the problem today. Science versus scientists, how to recognize the difference is basically what our talk is going to be about. Observational research is things that you can observe, and it's science, and but what happens with scientism is that it goes beyond the observational and saying that science can validate other things. Scientism is the philosophical belief that the hard sciences such as physics, chemistry, and biology provide the only genuine knowledge of reality. While they often use pejoratively the term described as a worldview that elevates the scientific method as the sole or most authoritative method to determine the truth, often at the expense of other disciplines like philosophy, ethics, or religion. And they all kind of trump them, and they're no longer effective anymore. Key forms of scientism. Scholars generally distinguish between two main identities of this belief. Strong scientism, the view that only scientific knowledge is real knowledge. Proponents of this view may argue that any claim that cannot be scientifically tested is merely a matter of personal opinion or emotions. Weak scientism, the view that while non-scientific knowledge may exist, scientific knowledge is vastly superior and should be the gold standard for all inquiry. Current tenets and characteristics. Epistemological monopolism, the belief that science has a monopoly on knowledge, effectively privatizing ethics, aesthetics, and theology as subjective feelings. Universal applicability, the attempt to apply scientific methods to fields traditionally considered outside its scope, such as neuroscience to solve the problem of free will or biology to define morality. Reductionism, the tendency to reduce complex human experiences like consciousness or love solely to physical processes such as brain chemistry or evolutionary survival mechanisms. And these are big problems, consciousness and how did this come from? And they just kind of write it off that science has already described it. Common criticisms. Critics range from theologians or to philosophers of science, often highlight several flaws in scientism. Self-refutation, the claim that only science can provide knowledge, is itself a philosophical statement, not a scientific one. Therefore, by its own standard, scientism cannot be known to be true. Foundational assumptions. Science relies on non-scientific assumptions such as law of logic, the reliability of common senses, and the uniformity of nature, which science itself cannot prove. But they say it can, but it can't. The ought-is problem. Critics argue science can describe what is facts, but cannot prescribe what ought to be values, meaning it is fundamentally limited in addressing ethics. Scientific modesty. Many practitioners argue that true science involves recognizing its own provisional nature and limitations, whereas scientism treats scientific theories as infallible dogmas. Blind faith in settled science or treating scientific pronouncements as unquestionable moral political authority has justified atrocities such as eugenics, forced sterilization, some 20th century totalitarianism, uses of scientific socialism or racial science. Scientism can discourage humanity, criticism, and ethical reflection outside narrow empirical bounds. And so this is it. They think, hey, science says it's okay. It's okay. That's the only thing that they use to determine if it's okay or not. In conclusion, science is extraordinarily powerful and successful used within its proper domain, but turning it into a totalitizing worldview creates logical, practical, and human problems. And so it's a problem. You can't discover historical events that haven't been observed by science. It can only observe the present, but they think science can do everything. You don't have any historical science. You don't have to worry about forensic science. You don't have to worry about anything because they have all the answers. But the problem is they've ruined the thinking of people.